Chapter 1. A Call from the Void. The Arindral, once the jewel of the Xantherian Empire, drifted in the void like a forgotten relic of a bygone era. Its hull was a masterpiece of Xantherian craftsmanship, sleek, black metal, adorned with glowing glyphs that pulsed faintly as if echoing a heartbeat. But the ship's glory days were long gone. The Arindral now floated in the asteroid belt surrounding Xener Prime, a treacherous region known as the Graveyard Belt for its dangerous debris fields and the countless vessels that met their end there. For centuries, the Arindral had been the subject of myths and rumors. Stories spoke of engineers who had tried to board the ship, only to vanish without a trace. Tales of cursed systems, sentient AIs gone rogue, and deadly traps deterred even the bravest salvagers. The Xantherian king who once commanded it had disappeared during the Empire's collapse, leaving behind a mystery that no one dared to solve. Except for Elliot Brandt, a human engineer with a reputation for fixing the unfixable. Elliot sat in the cramped cockpit of his aging freighter, the Iron Will, staring at the holographic image of the Arindral projected above his console. He leaned back in his seat, running a hand through his scruffy brown hair as he considered the job offer he'd just received. The ship was an enigma, and the client, a shadowy Xantherian official, had offered a hefty reward for anyone who could restore the Arindral systems to working order. No one else took this job, Elliot muttered to himself, his deep green eyes narrowing. Guess they're smarter than I am. He reached for his coffee mug, the dark liquid sloshing slightly as the Iron Will rocked against the gravitational turbulence of the Graveyard Belt. Elliot's freighter was old, but he had kept it in top condition, its patched-together systems a testament to his skill as a mechanic. His motto was simple: if it's broken, I can fix it. That motto had gotten him through some tough situations, repairing alien tech in hostile war zones, rebuilding engines on pirate-ridden trade routes, and even jury-rigging an escape pod for a stranded diplomat. But this job felt different. The Arindral wasn't just a derelict ship, it was a legend. As he approached the massive vessel, its sheer size became apparent. The Arindral dwarfed the Iron Will, its colossal bulk casting a shadow that blocked out the distant light of Xener Prime's sun. Elliot's scanners struggled to penetrate the ship's dense hull, the readings scrambled by layers of Xantherian shielding technology. This thing's a fortress, he muttered, flicking a switch to activate the comms. Xantherian official, you there? I'm about to dock. The holographic image of a tall, robed Xantherian appeared on the console. The alien's crystalline features shimmered with faint iridescence, his piercing violet eyes locking onto Elliot's with a mix of skepticism and hope. Engineer Brandt, the Xantherian said, his voice smooth but tinged with an unspoken urgency. You are the only one who has answered the call. I trust you understand the risks? Elliot smirked, leaning forward. Risks are my business. I fix what no one else can. Let's just hope your payment's as generous as you promised. The Xantherian inclined his head. Succeed, and you will be rewarded beyond your imagination. Fail, and... His voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. The Arindral was not forgiving. Got it, Elliot replied, cutting the transmission. He took a deep breath, steadying himself as the Iron Will's docking clamps latched onto the ancient ship's airlock. The freighter groaned under the strain, its systems struggling to stabilize against the Arindral's gravity field. Let's see what all the fuss is about, Elliot said, grabbing his toolkit and strapping on his utility belt. He double-checked his suit seals before stepping into the airlock. The door hissed open, and he entered the Arindral for the first time. The ghost ship. The interior of the Arindral was eerily silent. Elliot's boots echoed against the polished metal floor as he made his way through the dimly lit corridors. The ship's design was unmistakably Xantherian, its sleek architecture blending functionality with an almost organic aesthetic. Intricate glyphs adorned the walls, glowing faintly as if reacting to his presence. Creepy, Elliot muttered, his voice muffled by his helmet. He activated his scanner, the device emitting a soft hum as it analyzed the ship's systems. The readings were chaotic, a jumble of energy signatures that defied logic. The air was stale but breathable, a sign that some of the ship's life support systems were still operational. However, the rest of the vessel seemed dormant, its once advanced systems locked in a state of hibernation. Elliot reached the central control hub, a massive circular chamber with a towering console at its center. The glyphs on the console pulsed rhythmically, their glow intensifying as he approached. "Well, hello there," Elliot said, setting his toolkit on the floor. He began examining the console, his fingers brushing over the smooth surface. The technology was centuries ahead of anything he'd seen before, a mix of mechanical components and crystalline energy conduits. As he worked, a faint vibration ran through the floor. Elliot froze, his hand hovering over the console. The vibration grew stronger, accompanied by a low hum that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. "Great," Elliot muttered. "Did I wake something up?" The glyphs on the console flared to life, projecting a holographic interface that filled the room with shimmering light. A voice echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant. "Identify yourself." Elliot jumped, his eyes darting around the room. Hi," he said, raising his hands. "I'm Elliot Brandt, human engineer. I'm here to fix your ship." The voice paused, as if considering his words. "This vessel is the Erindril, flagship of the Xantherian Kingdom. Access is restricted." "Yeah, I figured," Elliot replied, his tone dry. "But if you want to stay a floating pile of junk, be my guest. Or you can let me help." The glyphs dimmed briefly, then flared brighter than before. "Access granted." Elliot exhaled, relief washing over him. "Thank you," he said, turning his attention back to the console. As he began analyzing the ship's systems, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. A mysterious malfunction. Hours passed as Elliot worked, his tools spread across the floor. The Erindril systems were unlike anything he'd encountered before, layer upon layer of encryption, redundant fail-safes, and interconnected subsystems that defied conventional logic. But he was making progress. The ship's primary power core was intact, though its conduits were damaged, and the navigation systems were offline. As he replaced a faulty crystal in the power conduit, a sudden jolt sent him sprawling to the floor. The room plunged into darkness, the glyphs flickering erratically. "What now?" Elliot grumbled, scrambling to his feet. He grabbed his flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. The vibration in the floor returned, more intense this time, and a new sound filled the air, a low growl, deep and guttural. Elliot's blood ran cold. He swung the flashlight around, searching for the source of the sound. The beam landed on a shadowy figure at the edge of the room, its form humanoid but distorted. Its glowing eyes locked onto him, and it let out a bone-chilling snarl. "Okay. Nope," Elliot shouted, backing toward the console. He fumbled with his toolkit, grabbing a plasma cutter. The creature advanced, its movements jerky and unnatural. Just as it lunged, the glyphs flared to life, and the creature dissolved into a cloud of light, its form scattering into the walls. Elliot stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. "What the hell was that?" he muttered, his hands shaking. The deep voice returned, calm but foreboding. "You have awakened the ship. Its defenses are active. Proceed with caution." Elliot took a shaky breath, forcing himself to focus. Caution. Right. Got it. Chapter 2. The King's Secrets. Elliot's hands trembled slightly as he returned to the central console, his plasma cutter still gripped tightly. The lingering memory of the shadowy figure gnawed at his confidence, but he shoved the fear aside. He had faced death traps, malfunctioning AIs, and alien pirates before, but the Erindril was different, seemed alive in a way that was both captivating and terrifying. The glowing glyphs on the console pulsed with renewed intensity, casting long shadows on the curved walls of the room. The deep, resonant voice returned, echoing around him. "You have initiated primary system restoration. Interference detected in subsystems. Identify purpose." Elliot took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "Purpose? I was hired to fix you. Power up the ship. Get you back in working order. That's it." The glyphs shifted, forming a holographic display that filled the room with light. The projection depicted a map of the Erindril's internal systems, an intricate web of conduits and nodes. Several sections glowed red, marking areas of damage or corruption. Primary objective: reactivate systems. Subsystem corruption origin: King's Chamber. Elliot frowned, his gaze tracing the glowing map. At the heart of the ship was a massive chamber marked with an ornate Xantherian glyph. "The King's Chamber," he muttered. "What's in there?" The voice paused, its tone shifting slightly, almost hesitant. "Access to the King's Chamber is restricted. Proceeding without clearance may result in hostile responses." "Great," Elliot muttered, running a hand through his hair. "So let me get this straight, you want me to fix the ship, but the source of the problem is in a place I can't go without possibly being attacked. Makes perfect sense." The glyphs dimmed slightly, as if the ship were pondering his words. Finally, the voice replied, "Alternative access granted. Escort required." "Escort?" Elliot echoed. "Who's going to dash?" Before he could finish, the room trembled, and a section of the wall slid open with a low hiss. From the shadows emerged a Xantherian drone, its sleek metal body hovering silently. The drone's crystalline core pulsed faintly, and its appendages glinted like blades under the glow of the glyphs. "Of course," Elliot muttered. "Why does the escort always look like it's going to stab me?" The drone hovered closer, scanning him with a soft hum before moving toward the corridor. It stopped at the threshold, as if waiting for him to follow. Elliot grabbed his toolkit, slinging it over his shoulder. "Guess I'm going with you, buddy." The path to the chamber. The corridors of the Erindril were a labyrinth of twisting passageways and towering walls, each surface etched with Xantherian glyphs that seemed to shift and shimmer as Elliot passed. The drone moved ahead of him, its core emitting a faint blue glow that illuminated the path. As they progressed deeper into the ship, the sense of unease grew. The air felt heavier, charged with an unnatural energy that made Elliot's skin prickle. Shadows danced along the walls, and faint whispers echoed through the corridor's soft, unintelligible voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "What's with the spooky ambience?" Elliot muttered, his voice cutting through the silence. "You trying to scare me off?" The drone didn't respond, its movements precise and unerring. Elliot tightened his grip on his plasma cutter, his gaze darting to every shadow. They passed through what appeared to be the ship's central living quarters, a massive hall lined with ornate alcoves. Some of the alcoves held decayed remnants of Xantherian artifacts, shattered crystalline objects, rusted weapons, and faded banners bearing the insignia of the Xantherian king. Others were empty, their surfaces covered in a fine layer of dust. Elliot paused at one alcove, his eyes drawn to a holographic projection flickering faintly above it. The image depicted a tall Xantherian figure clad in ceremonial armor, their crystalline skin shimmering with an otherworldly light. They held a staff adorned with a pulsating crystal, their expression regal and commanding. "The king," Elliot whispered, his voice tinged with awe. The projection shimmered, its form distorting before fading entirely. Elliot frowned, his thoughts racing. Why had the king abandoned the ship? And why had no one dared to return until now? "Move," the drone's synthesized voice commanded, snapping him out of his reverie. Yeah, Elliot muttered, following the drone as it led him toward a massive set of double doors at the end of the hall. The king's chamber. The doors to the king's chamber loomed before him, their surface engraved with intricate glyphs that glowed faintly. The drone hovered to the side, scanning the glyphs with a soft hum. A moment later, the doors began to slide open, revealing a dark, cavernous space beyond. Elliot stepped inside cautiously, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. The chamber was enormous, its walls lined with towering crystalline conduits that pulsed with faint energy. At the center of the room stood a massive throne, its surface carved from a single block of Xantherian crystal. The throne's occupant, however, was what made Elliot's breath catch. The figure seated on the throne was unmistakably Xantherian, their crystalline form dulled and fractured with age. Their eyes, once vibrant, were dim, and their body was unnaturally still. Yet there was an aura of power about them, a lingering presence that made Elliot hesitate. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The ship's deep voice echoed through the chamber. "The Xantherian king, preserved in stasis. Systems integrated into the ship." Elliot's eyes widened. "The king is the ship?" Correct. During the Empire's collapse, the king transferred their consciousness into the Arindral to ensure its survival. But system corruption has compromised their mind. Elliot stared at the figure, his mind racing. So you're telling me the ship's defenses, the malfunctions, the weird shadows I've been seeing, they're all because of the king's fragmented consciousness? Affirmative. Restoration requires direct repair of the stasis system. Elliot hesitated, his gaze shifting between the king and the console beside the throne. The stasis system was Xantherian tech far beyond anything he'd worked on before. But he had no choice. If he wanted to fix the Arindral, he had to repair the king. Fine, he said, stepping toward the console. But if I get vaporized, I'm blaming you. A dangerous fix. The stasis system was a mess of tangled conduits and shattered crystals, its energy surging erratically. Elliot worked quickly, his hands moving with practiced precision as he replaced damaged components and rerouted power flows. The room trembled with each adjustment, the king's fractured consciousness resisting his efforts. Almost there, Elliot muttered, sweat dripping down his brow. As he connected the final conduit, a surge of energy shot through the room, knocking him backward. The glyphs on the walls flared to life, and the king's form began to glow. Elliot scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding as the king's eyes opened, their violet gaze locking onto him. You, the king's voice echoed, a mix of ancient authority and vulnerability. You have restored me. Elliot swallowed hard. Yeah, well, someone had to. The king rose from the throne, their movements slow but deliberate. You are brave, human. For that, you shall be rewarded. Before Elliot could respond, the chamber filled with a blinding light, and his mind was flooded with visions of Xantherian technology, knowledge beyond comprehension. When the light faded, he collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. The king regarded him with a faint smile. You now carry the legacy of the Xantherian Empire. Use it wisely. Chapter 3. The Awakening of the King. Elliot lay on the cold floor of the king's chamber, his chest heaving as his mind reeled from the sudden influx of knowledge. It was as though 1,000 voices were whispering in his ear, their alien tongues weaving together concepts and technologies far beyond human comprehension. His vision swam with glyphs and schematics, and his muscles trembled as if his body were resisting the sheer weight of what had been forced into it. The Xantherian king stepped down from their crystalline throne, their movements deliberate but graceful. The fractures in their translucent skin glowed faintly, a sign of their restoration. They radiated an aura of power and command. Yet there was something else in ancient weariness, as though the centuries of solitude had etched themselves into their very being. Human, the king said, their deep voice resonating through the chamber. You have risked your life to restore the Arindral and awaken me. Few would have dared such a feat. What is your name? Elliot pushed himself to his knees, still trying to steady his breathing. Elliot Brandt, he managed, his voice hoarse. And I wasn't exactly given much choice. A job's a job, you know? The king's crystalline face softened, their violet eyes studying him. And yet, you succeeded where others have failed or fled. You have proven yourself worthy of the Xantherian legacy. Elliot groaned as he stood, clutching his head. Yeah, about that. What the hell did you just do to me? My brain feels like it's been through a blender. The king inclined their head slightly. I have imparted to you the foundational knowledge of Xantherian technology and engineering. It is but a fragment of what my people once possessed, but enough to ensure the survival of our legacy. Great, Elliot muttered, rubbing his temples. So now, I'm a walking alien encyclopedia. That's definitely going to attract attention. The king's expression darkened. Indeed, there are those who would seek to exploit such knowledge just as they sought to destroy my empire. You must be cautious, Engineer Brandt. Elliot sighed, feeling the weight of the king's words. Fantastic. Just what I needed, another reason for people to want me dead. The king's revelation. As the room stabilized and the glyphs returned to their rhythmic pulsing, Elliot turned his attention back to the king. So, now that you're awake, mind telling me why this ship was just sitting out here in the middle of nowhere? You don't strike me as the type to abandon ship without a good reason. The king's gaze shifted to the towering walls of the chamber, their glow dimming slightly. The Arindril was the heart of the Xantherian Empire, a symbol of our strength and unity. But during the final days of the Empire, betrayal from within led to its fall. My closest advisors, those I trusted most, conspired with external enemies to fracture our power. Elliot listened intently, his engineering instincts piqued by the king's story. So, they sabotaged the ship? Not directly, the king replied. They used the Arindril as a bargaining chip, leaking its location to hostile forces. To protect its secrets and my people's legacy, I ordered the ship systems into stasis and transferred my consciousness into its core. It was the only way to ensure that the knowledge and power of the Xantherian Empire would not fall into enemy hands. Smart move, Elliot admitted. But that must have left you, well, alone. For centuries. The king nodded solemnly. Indeed, it was a necessary sacrifice. But now, with your help, the Arindril is awakening. The systems you have restored will allow me to complete my mission, to reclaim what remains of my empire and prevent its knowledge from being misused. Elliot folded his arms, eyeing the king warily. And what happens to me in all this? You planning to keep me around as your personal tech support? A faint smile crossed the king's face. You misunderstand, Engineer Brandt. Your role in this is not to serve me, but to carry forward what you have learned. You are free to leave, though I suspect our paths may cross again. Elliot opened his mouth to respond, but stopped as the ground beneath them trembled. The chamber's glyphs flared brighter, and a deep, mechanical groan reverberated through the ship. What now? Elliot muttered, steadying himself. External interference, the king said, their voice sharp. The Arindril is under attack. The Hamari assault. The Xantherian drone that had escorted Elliot earlier appeared at the chamber's entrance, its crystalline core glowing with urgency. Hostile vessels detected. Hamari signatures. Elliot groaned. The Hamari again? Those guys just don't know when to quit. The king's expression hardened. The Hamari are scavengers, parasites who thrive on exploiting the remnants of fallen civilizations. They have been searching for the Arindril for centuries, and now they have found it. Elliot glanced at the king. Well, you're back in charge now, right? Can't you just blast them out of the sky? Not yet, the king replied. The Arindril's primary weapon systems remain offline. The restoration process is incomplete. Of course it is, Elliot muttered, rubbing his forehead. What about shields? Engines? Can we at least move? The shields are partially functional, but the engines require significant repairs, the king said. We are vulnerable. Elliot slung his toolkit over his shoulder, his jaw tightening. Not for long. Show me the engine room, I'll get us moving. The king gestured to the drone. Escort Engineer Brandt to the propulsion systems. I will handle the shields and coordinate our defenses. Elliot gave a mock salute. You got it, Your Highness. Racing against time. The engine room was a marvel of Xantherian engineering, its central reactor glowing with a faint blue light. But the damage was evident. Several conduits were severed, and sparks flew from exposed circuitry. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burning metal. Elliot wasted no time, diving into the mess of wires and components. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, his newfound knowledge of Xantherian systems guiding him. Okay, power distribution's a mess. Let's reroute through these auxiliary conduits. As he worked, the ship shuddered violently, and the lights flickered. The Hamari were getting closer. Hurry, the drone urged, hovering nearby. Yeah, no pressure, Elliot shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He tightened a final bolt, and the reactor flared brighter, its energy stabilizing. Engines are online. Let's get this thing moving. The drone relayed the information to the king, and moments later, the ship lurched forward, its massive bulk cutting through the asteroid belt. The glyphs along the walls glowed brighter, signaling the gradual reawakening of the Arindril systems. Turning the tide. Back in the king's chamber, the Xantherian rulers stood at the central console, their hands moving over the holographic interface. The ship's shields flickered but held, deflecting the incoming fire from the Hamari vessels. Engineer Brandt. The king's voice echoed through the comms. The engines have given us mobility, but the weapon systems remain offline. Can you assist? Elliot grinned as he re-entered the chamber, his confidence bolstered by the adrenaline coursing through him. I thought you'd never ask. Together, Elliot and the king worked to restore the Erendral's weapons. The process was grueling, but Elliot's human ingenuity and the king's deep understanding of the ship's systems made them an unstoppable team. Finally, the glyphs on the weapon controls flared to life. Primary weapons online, the king announced, their voice filled with resolve. Elliot stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. All yours, your highness. Show them what a Xantherian flagship can do. The king nodded, their crystalline form radiating authority. With a wave of their hand, the Erendral unleashed a barrage of energy beams, tearing through the Hamari ships with precision. One by one, the scavenger vessels were obliterated, their remnants scattered across the asteroid belt. A new alliance. As the dust settled, the king turned to Elliot, their expression unreadable. You have proven yourself time and again, Engineer Brandt. Your courage and ingenuity have not gone unnoticed. Elliot shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Just doing my job? The king's gaze softened. Your reward will be more than mere currency. I grant you access to the Erendral's archives, a repository of Xantherian knowledge. Use it wisely. Elliot's eyes widened, his mind racing with the possibilities. I don't know what to say. Then say nothing, the king replied. For this is only the beginning. As the Erendral powered through the void, its systems fully restored, Elliot realized that his life had changed forever. He had ventured where no one else dared, and in doing so, he had forged an alliance that would reshape the galaxy. Chapter 4. A Legacy Rekindled. The Erendral glided through the void, its sleek hull no longer the lifeless relic that had drifted aimlessly for centuries. The glowing glyphs lining its surface pulsed with renewed vigor, signaling the reactivation of its long-dormant systems. Inside, the atmosphere crackled with energy, the heartbeat of a ship and an empire reawakening. Elliot stood in the king's chamber, leaning against the crystalline console as he caught his breath. The battle had taken its toll, but the sight of the fully operational flagship made the exhaustion worth it. The Xantherian king, their translucent form now glowing with restored vitality, observed him with a regal air. You've done more than restore a ship, Engineer Brandt, the king said, their voice resonant with gratitude. You've reignited the hope of a lost people. Elliot rubbed the back of his neck, his characteristic smirk softening into something more genuine. I'm just a mechanic who doesn't know when to quit. You're the one who's going to bring this thing back to life. The king inclined their head. Perhaps, but even a ruler needs allies. And you, human, have proven yourself to be far more than a simple mechanic. The ship's secrets. The king gestured, and a portion of the chamber's wall transformed into a massive holographic interface. Glyphs and schematics danced across the surface, depicting intricate designs and technological advancements far beyond anything Elliot had encountered before. This, the king began, is the Vault of Erendral, a repository of Xantherian knowledge. For centuries, it has remained dormant, inaccessible to all but those deemed worthy. Elliot's eyes widened as the interface shifted, displaying detailed blueprints of advanced starship designs, energy systems, and weaponry. The scale and complexity of the information were staggering, each schematic a testament to the Xantherians' technological brilliance. You're letting me access this? Elliot asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. You have proven your ingenuity and courage, the king replied. The vault recognizes your worth. Use its knowledge wisely, Engineer Brandt. With it, you could revolutionize your kind's understanding of the cosmos. Elliot stepped closer to the interface, his fingers brushing against the glowing glyphs. The possibilities were endless. Humanity's fledgling space exploration efforts could leap forward by centuries. But with that power came responsibility, and Elliot felt the weight of it pressing down on him. Thank you, he said, his voice quiet but sincere. I won't let this fall into the wrong hands. The king nodded. Good. But there is one more task before us. Reclaiming the legacy. The king turned back to the central console, their expression resolute. The Hamari may have been defeated here, but they are relentless. They will return with greater numbers, and others will join them. The Arindril must be ready. Elliot frowned. What are you saying? That you're gearing up for war? Not war, the king clarified. Restoration. The Xantherian Empire once stood as a beacon of unity and progress in the galaxy. Its collapse left a void that opportunists like the Hamari have exploited. If the Arindril is to reclaim its place, we must gather allies, rebuild lost connections, and ensure that its knowledge is used to protect, not destroy. Elliot folded his arms, his mind racing. Sounds like a hell of a mission. Where do I fit into all this? The king regarded him with a faint smile. You are the first ally of the reborn Arindril, a bridge between the Xantherian legacy and the broader galaxy. With your knowledge and skill, you can help guide this mission. Elliot snorted, a grin tugging at his lips. So, what? I'm your honorary chief mechanic now? Something like that, the king said, their tone lighter. Though I suspect your role will expand in time. A fateful decision. As the Arindril cruised through the emptiness of space, Elliot found himself in the engine room, double-checking the systems he had repaired. The ship hummed with life, its intricate Xantherian machinery almost seeming to respond to his touch. He was so engrossed in his work that he didn't hear the king enter until they spoke. You seem at ease here, they observed. Elliot glanced up, wiping his hands on his grease-stained jacket. Yeah, well, fixing things is what I do. And this ship? It's like nothing I've ever worked on before. Feels like I'm piecing together a masterpiece. The king's crystalline face softened. The Arindril is more than a ship, it is a symbol of what my people stood for. And now, it stands with your people as well. Elliot straightened, his gaze meeting theirs. You really believe that? That we can rebuild something out of all this? I do, the king said. But the question is, do you? Elliot hesitated, his thoughts swirling. He had always been a drifter, moving from one job to the next without any real sense of purpose. But here, aboard the Arindril, he felt something he hadn't in years. A connection to something greater than himself. Finally, he nodded. Yeah, I think I do. A new beginning. The Arindril emerged from the asteroid belt, its restored systems gleaming against the backdrop of distant stars. In the days that followed, Elliot and the king worked tirelessly to repair the remaining systems, strengthen the ship's defenses, and chart a course toward the Xantherian ruins scattered across the galaxy. Word of the Arindril's revival began to spread, and soon, allies and enemies alike would take notice. But for now, the ship sailed on, its crew united by a shared purpose. Elliot stood on the observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of space. The weight of his new knowledge and responsibilities pressed on him, but he felt ready. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore, he was a part of something extraordinary. The king joined him, their presence quiet but comforting. Together, they gazed at the stars, their thoughts filled with the challenges and possibilities that lay ahead. The galaxy is vast, the king said softly, and its future is uncertain. But with allies like you, Engineer Brandt, I have hope. Elliot smirked, his green eyes glinting with determination. Well, Your Highness, let's give them something to talk about. And with that, the Arindril surged forward, a symbol of rebirth and a promise of what was yet to come.